Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be the final part of the Releasing 10 recap. And we're just gonna start by saying a few things. I'm so sorry this took so long to come. I have been dealing with ridiculousness, with absolute mess that has really just taken me mentally down. I got very sick. My face swelled up really bad. I could not film a video. And that lasted about 2 weeks of my face going back to normal. If my face still moves a little bit weird, there's something a little bit off. I am so sorry. I apologize for that, but I could not move forward with anything else on my channel before I got this done. And so today's video is going to be part 3 of our Releasing 10 recap, and I'm so happy to be here and I'm so happy to be doing this. As you can see today, we're in Morning Black. The last video I did, I wore pink because they were in love and everything was pretty okay. Our girl Lizzie here, she was dealing with some things, but we had our brave knight Hugh Biggs to see us through. There's a reason we're in all black today, guys. There's a reason we are in Morning Black today for this video. And that's gonna lead me into my next point. Before we get into the rest of the recap, I need to give a trigger warning, and every time I say trigger warning, I plan to do some like interesting editing thing and I always forget to do it. So I'm gonna just say it now with my words. Releasing 10 is not a happy little romance book. That is not what Boys of Tommen is. Specifically, this 6th installment of the Boys of Tommen series, it is not a silly little rom-com quick read. This book is very triggering. This book is traumatizing to read. I genuinely believe for a few months there, was traumatized by this book. Even to this day, I do not read books the same. It has changed the way I look at the world. It has changed my view on so many things. It has opened up my mind in so many different ways. And I feel like I will probably never be the same after reading this book and getting as deep into it as I've been getting. If you follow me on TikTok, you know I spend a lot of time on TikTok like analyzing the absolute hell and theorizing the absolute hell out of these characters and this book. And so I just want to make it super clear that when you're watching this video, we are not talking about a happy little romance book. This is not a fantasy book. This is not a book that at the end we like clap and cheer for. This is a book of trauma. This is a book of overcoming your own mind, basically, and the struggles of a teenage girl who deals with some of the most traumatizing things any human being can deal with. And so this video is not for children. These books are not for children. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say. So yeah, we are going to jump right into our recap. We are starting at part 18 today. And guys, from here on out, it's just not a fun time. We are not having a great time anymore, and if I cry during this video, I'm just gonna apologize now, because I was going over my outline for this video last night and my poor husband had to like watch me sob and watch me have like a full mental breakdown. That is what this portion of Releasing 10 does to me. It puts me in a state of psychosis. And so go forward with us if you will, but just know we're in for it today, and like not in a fun way. We are in for it in a I can't believe this is how this ends, and no closure in sight. There is no closure in sight yet. So hopefully soon Claiming 10 is coming, but let's get on with Releasing 10. We begin part 3 of this Releasing 10 plot summary, and it is September 1st, 2003. And Lizzie and Hugh, they've had a great time. They're doing really well. They're in a great spot in their relationship, in their lives. Everything seems to be going super well. And we know when that happens, trouble is just around the corner. It's the first day back to school, September 1st, 2003. Lizzie and Hugh have had their incredible summer, a summer of love, a summer of romance, a summer of joy and happiness, and just knowing that these two are ready to stick together through thick and thin. There's nothing that could ever tear our guys apart here. She's doing so well, in fact. There has been minimal communication, but still some form of communication between Lizzie and our boy Gibbsy here. And when Lizzie wakes up on the morning of September 1st, she goes about her normal routine. She's brushing her teeth, washing her face, she's eating her breakfast, she's taking her meds. Very important, she's taking those meds. She hops on the bus where she proceeds to make out with Hugh for the entire bus ride. And they make a plan to meet in their little library room together at some point during the school day. And she had a perfect day. Lizzie explained September 1st, 2003 as the quintessential perfect day in the life for her, where everything is going exactly as it should be. The world for this one moment is right. And then she gets off the bus. She hops on the bus to get home. She gets off, and our girl Lizzie has had such a good day that she's skipping home. I didn't think saying that out loud was gonna make me tear up, but she's had such a, I'm gonna cry. She's had such a good day that she is actually skipping home from the bus. Oh my. And she gets behind the gate of her family's estate. Remember, Lizzie lives at Old Hall House, which is this massive estate, very high class, this giant house that she lives in. Behind this gate, she closes that gate and she's skipping up to her house when she looks over and she notices deer and she hears rustling in the woods. And suddenly, Lizzie is back in a nightmare, or so she thinks. So Lizzie thinks she is hallucinating, but I'm just gonna tell you exactly what is going on. Our monster right here, Mark Allen, had been hiding in the woods, waiting for Lizzie to get off her bus. He throws something over her head, so she kind of gets very disoriented. She thinks she's hallucinating. She heard the voice that's in all of her nightmares. We're not going to get too deep into the details of what's happening. I'm just going to tell you what's happening. Mark starts to assault Lizzie the same way that he always does. I can't even spit it out. He basically confesses everything to Lizzie. He reminds Lizzie that he got rid of Kiva, and if Lizzie ever opens her mouth about what's happening, he would get rid of Hugh. And so she's just frozen, she's screaming, she's crying, and the monster is taking enjoyment out of that. She describes herself as being caged inside of her body while this is occurring. And we learn that Mark Allen actually hands Lizzie those Polaroids that we talked about in part 1 that he had taken of Lizzie when she was just 5 years old. And Lizzie, after she's assaulted and she is told that Hugh will be hurt if she ever says anything, Lizzie kind of just lets her mind slip into mania. Mark also lets Lizzie know that he is only in town for what he calls a flying visit. He's only passing through. He is not here to stay, but he says that he couldn't resist giving his little munchkin a visit, which, oh my God, I cannot wait for claiming 10. I can't wait for claiming 10. I can't wait for claiming 10. This man needs to die. So we learn that he's only there passing through town. He is really using in the dialogue, and again, I'm not going to get into specifics of what is being said to her because it is, I can't read it out loud. He's basically using Hughie against Lizzie. He's asking her if Hugh knows what kind of girl she really is, and says that if Lizzie ever says anything to Hughie about Kiva, about their arrangement, about anything that Mark has ever done, Hugh is up next after Kiva. And there is a part of this scene that I'd like to read to you guys because it really just represents this part of Lizzie's life, and I think it really helps you understand her character a little bit more if we get into this specific scene. People in the Boys of Tommen fandom just refer to this as the deer scene because of what it represents for Lizzie. Okay, so Lizzie eventually loses consciousness, and when she wakes up in the woods, I'm going to read to you what Lizzie is experiencing. Even in my dreams, I lost consciousness. When I finally woke up, I remained perfectly still, not daring to move a muscle out of fear of jinxing myself and passing out again. Numb, I just laid on my back for a long time, staring at the late evening sky. How long I'd been asleep, I couldn't say, but it had to have been several hours because the sun was much lower in the sky. Turning my head to the side, I stared into the woods and felt a tear trickle down my cheek when a red deer took a tentative step out from behind a tree less than 10 feet from where I had been lying. The deer watched me with wide, unblinking brown eyes. I didn't move a muscle, momentarily captivated by the raw beauty of this ethereal creature, while a swell of sympathy washed over me. We were so very similar, this deer and me. We were both prey. An owl hooting high in the trees broke our trance-like stare down, and the deer quickly skittered away. Run, I whispered, watching it disappear from my view, as fast as you can. And that also mirrors something that Kiva had said to Lizzie. One of the last things Lizzie heard from Kiva was to run as fast as she can and get away from Mark. That scene kills me. About 2 days later, Lizzie is really struggling. She feels broken mentally and physically. She describes herself to be caged inside her own body. She's having very severe suicidal thoughts. And she finds the Polaroids and she's super confused, and she hears a voice in her head and she lets her mind slip into mania. So then we move on to a few days later. It is now September 9th, 2003, and we are in Hugh Big's perspective. And he is noticing that Lizzie seems to be in a state of rapid cycling. And he knows this because the last time she was this out of it was that time we talked about in part 2 where Lizzie tried to hang herself with a horse rein. And Hugh is just very confused as to what could have possibly brought this on when they had such a good summer, they had such a great day back, and now Lizzie is back to where she was after her sister passed away. And Hugh is really questioning whether this is mania or something else, because he says this feels much darker than what it was last time. Last time I think he attributed it to grief, and now it has just really come out of nowhere. And they are receiving their junior cert exam results. Hughie actually got 11 honor level A's. So they want to go to the disco. The whole gang wants to go to the disco and celebrate. Hugh is very worried though, because when they get to the disco, Lizzie is out of her mind dancing crazy with Claire here. Gypsy is just thinking, well, at least Lizzie's having a fun time, and Hughie knows better. He knows that this is not a good sign. The behavior that Lizzie is displaying is a sign of only bad things to come, and therefore Hugh is very worried. He's watching Lizzie on the dance floor and he gets this dark, sinking feeling about her. And then we move on to September 22nd, 2003, and Lizzie is actually at a doctor's appointment, and she's having thoughts of actually harming her doctor, but she's realizing she's never felt better. She's in a state of euphoria. She is in the highest high she's ever been in. She feels like she's floating. She's feeling nothing, like nothing can touch her, nothing could reach her. And I'm actually going to read you a little bit of what Lizzie explains this feeling to be, because I am not someone who has ever dealt with this sort of thing. I feel like we could all understand Lizzie a little bit better if I just read it straight from the book. This poor fool was out of his depth with me, which suited me just fine because nothing made sense anymore except the colors. Holy f***, The colors were mesmerizing. My senses had heightened to the point where I had felt spiritually leveled up. I could feel the air touching my skin. I thought I might be the first person to see oxygen. It was blanketing my skin like ecstasy. Breathing made me ache for Hugh, and I couldn't stay still. I was restless and full of unbearable urges and desires. I loved this life. I wanted to climb onto a cloud with Hugh Biggs and take him away from all of our so-called friends. Perhaps this is what it felt like to spiral. I had no clue, and I cared even less. Everything was a trigger, spurring me into an agitated state of needing to move. Unease thrummed inside of my veins like a drum, pushing me to move and laugh and run and do anything I could to get this feeling out of me. So that is what Lizzie is currently dealing with. And on that same day, Huey is actually late for practice, and he gets an earful from our friend, Johnny Kavanaugh. And Johnny is laying into Huey for being late for training, for missing a few games. And Huey tells Johnny that he basically doesn't care and Lizzie will always come first. Johnny is looking at Hugh like he's crazy because, as we'll find out from our next deep dive, Johnny doesn't really think of anything but rugby. That change is coming. Hugh has no future plans for sports, and he basically just does them for fun. Even though he's amazing at them, he just does them as a hobby, as fun, as a way to stay active. And he's doing all of these sports now because he knows once he goes into medical school at Trinity, he's not going to have time for this sort of thing. And then we learn that Johnny Kavanaugh is actually very standoffish with everyone, all of the guys, except for Gibbsy. And since we are going to be diving into Binding 13, I decided to give you guys a little introduction into the character of Johnny Kavanaugh and how we will come to meet him come Binding 13. This is Johnny through Huey's eyes. That wasn't to say Johnny wasn't a good friend of mine. He was. He was the first one to step in and defend the three of us and always kept his word. If Cap told you he would do something, it got done. And if he told you he'd be somewhere, you didn't have to worry about him not showing up. His word was good. His heart was gold. His love life was private. His lips were sealed and his devotion to rugby was unmatched. Johnny lived his life on a rigid schedule and saw the world through a black and white lens. Even if we were close enough to discuss deep and meaningful topics, my relationship with Liz wasn't one he was well versed in. And by God, if you follow me on TikTok, we have gotten into that before. Moving on, Huey is just remembering how Lizzie kind of removed herself from the star that was Lizzie, Hugh, Claire, Gibbsy, and Feely. She really hasn't been super involved with their group activities recently. He talks about how when Lizzie got to Tommen, she acted like Gibbsy really didn't exist. She moved through Tommen like almost like she didn't know these people, almost like she didn't grow up with these people. And this is when Huey realizes that Lizzie and Johnny have never actually met. He's never had the chance to introduce Lizzie as his girlfriend to Johnny. And Huey actually says something very funny. He says, maybe one day a girl would walk into his world and bring him to his knees like Liz did to me, but until that day came, it was easier to say nothing. I wonder if that day is coming. Feely is actually super concerned too about Lizzie because of the behavior she's displaying. Feely even asks Huey if Lizzie is doing okay, but Huey is way too protective of Lizzie to let anyone in on her mental health struggles. So he just says she's fine. However, Huey received a call from Catherine Young, Lizzie's mom, saying that the doctors basically confirmed that Lizzie is spiraling again. She's going through rapid cycling again. But Feely lets Huey know that Feely will be there if Huey needs anything. I can't. Where is claiming 10? Then we move on to October 13th, 2003. We are in Lizzie's point of view. And Huey is begging her to please open up to your doctors. Tell them what you're going through. But Lizzie says that therapy and medication are no longer for her, that she feels great, she feels fine. She doesn't understand why she needs to deal with medicine every day and talk to doctors all the time that don't really listen to her anyway. Lizzie is trying to assure Hughie that she's fine, but Hughie basically tells her that this is not his first time on this roller coaster with her. And he explains to Lizzie that this is how it always starts, that first she goes up and down in her moods for weeks until she gets so high that she eventually crashes down. But Hughie assures her that even though this is a struggle that she has to go through, that he is going to be there with her and life is never boring with her, and that he loves her and he's going to stick this out with her, and he is there to help Lizzie. Then a few days later, on October 17th, we are back in Hughie's point of view, and Hughie, oh, we gotta move over for this one now, here we go, we're probably gonna have to scooch over on this side of the wall pretty soon. Hughie is noticing our bestie boy, Farmer Feely, is late to class and he's all flushed and he's blushing. We learn that our guy Feely has met a girl. He met a girl. So Feely has a new friend that he met in music club. And he was asking, is this anyone that Hughie knows? I don't know. Do you think Hugh and Katie are gonna become familiar with each other? I have no idea. Feely assures him that this girl is new and she's a transfer student. Feely actually asks Hughie that if by the time things are moving forward with this girl by Hughie's birthday party, and remember, Hughie every year has his big birthday costume party, but Feely asks Hughie if he could bring this new friend of his to Hughie's birthday party, and Hughie agrees. And Hughie is actually really happy to see Feely opening up to someone. And Hughie really recognizes what a big deal this is for Feely, because Feely never brings girls around. He never is serious about any of the girls that we know that Feely likes to hook up with. And he knows that this girl must be special if she got Feely's attention in this way. Then Hughie gets on the bus and he's waiting for Lizzie because Lizzie is having a sleepover at Claire's house, which is also obviously Hughie's house. And they're sitting on the bus together when Hughie looks over at Lizzie and immediately tenses, and he knows that he has to have a conversation with Lizzie. So now we are in Lizzie's point of view. It is the same day. Lizzie is going over to Hugh and Claire's house for this sleepover. As soon as she gets off the bus, she goes into their bathroom. Strangely enough, Hughie follows Lizzie into the bathroom, and Hughie is not happy. He sounds mad as heck, and Hughie actually drags Lizzie into his bedroom and tells her that he is now aware and he has seen that Lizzie is once again self-harming. And he also tells Lizzie that he can tell that she has gone off of her medication with Lizzie's condition and Lizzie's moods. That is a huge risk factor for Lizzie's well-being, to just stop all of her meds without medical supervision. And Hughie is fully aware of that. I mean, he has seen this film before and he didn't like the ending. He is now recognizing that Lizzie is pulling that again, and she is drifting into manic Liz. Lizzie just starts breaking down and apologizing. But, and this is such a sad scene to read, but Lizzie is sobbing, saying she just wants to be like everyone else. She wants to be able to function without medication, without having to talk to doctors all the time. She wants to be normal. She's only 15 years old at this point in time. I don't know if I clarified that. Hugh and Liz, they're both 15 years old and they are trying to navigate this very difficult thing on their own, pretty much. And Lizzie explains that taking all of these medicines and seeing all these doctors makes her feel like a guinea pig for them to just do tests on. And when Hughie sees Lizzie's reaction, he immediately ends the fight and just holds her and comforts her. And he feels awful that this is the reality that Lizzie has to live with every single day. And even though Hughie is so angry at Lizzie for doing the one thing that he basically begs her not to do, which is go off her meds and hurt herself, he promises her that he's never going to stop holding her and he's always going to be there for her. We move on to the 19th of October, and Hughie has done the right thing and he has told Lizzie's parents what Lizzie has done. And her parents end up sending her to a 48-hour hospital stay. And we learn that Lizzie's condition, which is early onset bipolar disorder, and remember, they don't know if she has type 1 or type 2, and because of her age and because of her youth and because it's so touch and go with this age demographic, Lizzie is actually experiencing what they call mixed episodes. And so when it's an adult who is familiar with their symptoms, it's very easy to treat, and a lot of people live very happy, healthy lives with this disorder. But because of Lizzie's age and they don't know what kind of bipolar she has, she's also going through puberty, she's a teenager, she's feeling things at like level 100 anyway. Any normal teenager does, but because of Lizzie's disorder, it is way more complicated for her. And I'm going to read another portion. I believe, as someone who is a huge Lizzie Young fan, gives us a lot of insight into Lizzie Young's character and the things that she has to deal with every single day, and just a way of understanding her. So I'm just going to read that. Lizzie is speaking with doctors and they're explaining to her that she is shifting rapidly between mania and super deep depressive episodes. That is what they consider the mixed episodes that Lizzie is dealing with. Lizzie says, "It was my lived experience, not theirs. I was the one who got swept up in mania before being spat down to the hellish depths of depression. I was the one who lost track of time and memories. I was the one whose will weakened with every passing day. I was the one without faith or hope for the future. I was the one whose mind chipped away at my soul, and I was the one who had to live like this until the day I died. None of these assholes had a single clue of how life was for me. No number of books, research, or college credentials could teach them either. Of course, Mom's first instinct was to cry while Dad was trying to admit me for inpatient treatment. Thankfully, he didn't get this way, and I was allowed to return home this evening, dosed to the high heavens with antipsychotics and sedatives, and a new script my father vowed to physically force into me if I even thought about f***ing around, like I give a what he does. He could try and lock me up all he wanted, but I would go down swinging." Lizzie is feeling very betrayed by Hughie, and she's very angry, but Hughie is just trying to get Lizzie back to herself. And in Lizzie's mind, she can hear the monster promising to hurt Hugh. Okay, so now we're moving on to October 24th, 2003. We are in Hughie's point of view, and Hughie says that there's this girl that's obsessed with Johnny Kavanaugh who makes a comment about Gibbsy liking older women. Huh. I wonder, is that going to come back? There's a lot of really cute banter between the four boys. Johnny explains that he doesn't like blondes. Everyone on the board is blonde except 2 people. Huh. I wonder if that will come back. And then we learn that Hugh's mom is throwing him his regular costume party, but Gibbsy is actually planning a rager of a party for Hughie while his mom is away with Claire at Claire's flag football tournament. So now we have 2 parties that are about to happen for Hugh Biggs' Sweet 16. But we know, because of what Hughie is dealing with, he is not in the mood for either party. He wants no part in this. He even wants Gibbsy to cancel, and Gibbsy says, heck no. So Hughie gets up and he goes looking for Lizzie, who we learn has been avoiding Hughie like the plague, which is very unlike Lizzie. And usually when Mike threatens to send Lizzie away, it scares her to death. But this time, she didn't react the way she usually does. And Lizzie is pretty indifferent. She doesn't care. And she's ignoring Hugh. So we know Lizzie is not acting like herself. Hughie finds Lizzie in that old library that she found when she first got to Tommen. And when he comes upon Lizzie in this room, we can hear Lizzie humming Silver Springs. Oh my God. Lizzie is humming Silver Springs by Fleetwood Mac. And this, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, is what we call foreshadowing. And we learn that Lizzie hasn't been to class and has no plans on making it to class. And Hughie needs to get going to get to training, but he wants to make sure that Lizzie makes it to her meeting with the school counselor. But Lizzie is over the doctors who cannot fix her. Then we move on to October 27th, 2003, and Hugh and Liz are actually on the footbridge where we know what happened to Kiva. And Lizzie takes Huey to the exact spot where Mark had thrown Kiva over the bridge. And Lizzie opens up to Huey, and she tells Huey that she was there, and she knows for a fact that that is the exact spot that it happened in. And our guy Hugh Biggs is in a panic because Lizzie is talking not normal. She is talking about Hugh and his special medicine, which, if you remember part 1 of the series, we know someone told Lizzie about a special medicine, and Lizzie is now asking Huey for his special medicine. Huey obviously, though, doesn't understand what that means. And then Lizzie jumps up on the railing of the footbridge, and she's standing, and Hugh is holding his breath. And then Lizzie starts talking even wilder. She starts saying that she feels like a bird, and she just knows that if they let go, they can fly. And then Lizzie closes her eyes, and luckily, just in time, Huey grabs her and saves her once again from trying to end her own life. And Huey just ends up taking Lizzie home. But the next day, on October 28th, when we're in Huey's point of view, he calls up Lizzie's dad and he tries to explain to her what's going on with Lizzie. And this is a very important part that we are going to be reading a few chunks out of, because what Mike says about Lizzie honestly was one of the most heartbreaking things I think I've ever read. So when Huey gets Mike on the phone, we actually learn that Catherine is unfortunately being hospitalized once again, and Mike likes to blame Lizzie anytime this sort of thing happens with Catherine. And he lets Huey know that Catherine is actually in the hospital from the stress of raising the biggest misfortune to ever happen to them. And he lets Huey know that he and his wife have washed their hands of Lizzie and they want nothing to do with her anymore. Mike tells Hugh to tell Sinead to just drop Lizzie off at any random hospital because they are done. So I think we talked about it in part 2 of my series here. But when Lizzie is on the verge of mania, she slips into what is called hypersexuality. And it's not in a silly, funny, haha way. It's in a borderline dangerous, she can't control herself kind of way. And Lizzie is having a very hard time with that right now. Then we move on. It is Hugh Biggs' 16th birthday, so happy birthday, Hugh Biggs. His mom has gone over to the neighbor's house, and Sinead is trusting that Hugh is going to be responsible with this little party that she has thrown for the kids. Lizzie plops herself down in Huey's lap, and then Huey takes Lizzie upstairs. Hugh and Liz actually get pretty close to going all the way. It's literally about to happen, and he stops her, and she loses it. Hugh stops because he does not want to take advantage of Lizzie the way Mark has taken advantage of Kiva, and he feels that when Lizzie is in this state and when she's in her manic episodes and she's not medicated, she's not herself, and he doesn't feel right by being with her in that way when she's like that, because he feels like he is taking advantage of her. And something we learn about Hugh Biggs is he is petrified to take advantage of Lizzie in the way that Mark had taken advantage of Kiva. He never wants to put Lizzie in that situation where he feels like he is crossing a line and she is not able to consent to him because of her mental illness. And that does not go over well with our girl, Lizzie Young here. She is enraged. She is enraged, to say the least. And so she decides, half dressed, she's going to go walking outside of Huey's neighborhood. And again, she's just in a hoodie when a big old hand lands on Lizzie's shoulder. I'm about to become the Joker. I'm like, I can't. And in Lizzie's state of mind, when she turns to see who has grabbed her shoulder, she's a little bit hazy with it. She recognizes this boy. She can't really make him out though. but she recognizes him as one of Huey's rugby friends. But we have met this boy before. This boy, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, this boy is another demon we call Pierce O'Neill. Pierce O'Neill happens to see Lizzie walking outside of Huey's house in just a hoodie. Enter Pierce. While Lizzie is talking to Pierce, they are winding themselves into a not very appropriate position, and Huey thankfully intervenes before it can go too far and tells Pierce to get his hands off of his girlfriend. But Huey is now looking at Lizzie in a way he has never looked at her before. We've seen Hugh Biggs jealous. This is not that though. This is betrayal. This is hurt. This is Huey realizing that Lizzie's illness may someday rip them apart. And he just asked Lizzie, what were you doing? What was that about? And Lizzie is not in the frame of mind to answer that. Lizzie has other things on the brain right now, and she can't really focus, and she's not really staying on topic. And Hugh is just getting very frustrated with her. And Huey even admits to Lizzie that when she gets like this, he gets kind of scared of her. And it is in this scene that Huey makes it abundantly clear he could take a lot of things from Liz. He can handle her mental illness. He could handle the mood swings. He could handle the depressive episodes. He could handle trying to get her to not off herself, the self-harming, the hospital stays, all of it he can handle. The one thing Huey will not tolerate from Lizzie is infidelity and cheating. Lizzie hears him, but we can tell Lizzie's not taking it super seriously. She keeps telling Hugh how hot he looks when he gets so mad at her. We can just see Huey is looking at his relationship with Lizzie a little bit differently right now, and you could really sense this like tonal shift between the two of them, and how Lizzie has one thing on her mind and Huey has something else on his mind. And now we move on to part 19, and this part is called The Great Betrayal. Okay, I don't even want to tell you guys this. I want to say, and that's where it ended, goodbye, but no. It unfortunately does not end there. So it's the next day. It is November 1st, 2003, and Lizzie wakes up in Claire's bed, and she immediately goes looking for Hugh. And when she finds Hugh in the Biggs kitchen, Hugh is sitting at the table with Gibbsy, and they're laughing and they're talking. And immediately Lizzie feels, oh my god. Lizzie is wondering why Hugh looks so happy to be hanging out with Gibbsy and he doesn't look happy to ever hang out with her. Lizzie's mind is spiraling. Lizzie is not in the room with us anymore. And as soon as Gibbsy leaves the Biggs house, Hugh lets Lizzie know that she is going to be going home. And Lizzie just asks Hugh to come back with him. He reluctantly agrees to go to Lizzie's house. When they get to Lizzie's house, Hugh is really upset by what he saw go down between Lizzie and Pierce the night before. He found them in that compromising position where it looked like something was about to happen between the two of them. And they're playing a card game, and Huey has really just hit his limit with Lizzie. And in this scene, we have Huey uninviting Lizzie to that second birthday party that Gibbsy is throwing him. You know, the rager when Huey's parents aren't going to be home, Claire's not going to be home, they're going to be drinking and going crazy. He now tells Lizzie she is uninvited and not welcome to be coming to that. Now we make it to the night of November 1st, 2003, which is the party that Gibbsy is throwing for Huey's birthday. Pierce actually shows up to Hugh's birthday party, and he's running his mouth about some of the BCS boys who have made an appearance to Hugh Big's house. Hughie just tells Pierce to basically get out of his face, how Pierce has a lot of nerve showing up at Hughie's house after the way he found Pierce and Lizzie the day before. And something else I want to point out about this part of the book, we have Gibbsy, where is he? We have Gibbsy calling himself a master concealer. And I just want to drop that little tidbit in there because when we get to Taming 7, we're going to really understand how Gibbsy is a master concealer. Hughie is just really worried all throughout the night that Lizzie will show up to the party. We jump to Lizzie's point of view, and this is so important. What we're about to discuss, huge trigger warning here for sexual assault. So Lizzie does show up to Hughie's house, and we know Lizzie is drunk, Lizzie is manic, and Lizzie is confused. She has no idea how she made it to Hugh's house. When she realizes where she is and she realizes the state she's in, she knows that Hughie is going to be pissed and that she is ruining his night. So what does Lizzie do? Lizzie decides to hide out in Hugh's bedroom. Now, when we jump to Hugh's point of view, we see there's a lot of girls that are trying to get with Hughie. Hughie's at his party and his girlfriend is nowhere to be found. So we have a lot of girls going up to Hughie asking for a dance, asking to hook up, asking weird freaking questions. And Hughie passes them off to his friend, and Gibbsy actually suggests that Hugh go lock up his room before someone gets in there to you know. So Hugh decides, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's go up and lock up my bedroom. Now, when Lizzie gets to Hughie's bedroom, she opens the door, she stumbles in, and who is in Hugh Big's bedroom? Pierce O'Neill, and Pierce lets Lizzie know that he had been in there waiting for her. And Lizzie is completely out of her mind at this point. She's drunk, she's manic, she's hypersexual, she's telling Pierce she just wants to feel something, and Hugh is mad at her, and Hugh won't touch her, and Pierce says, I'll do it. And Lizzie says, can you please go get Hugh? Can you just go down and find Hughie and send him up here? And that is not what Pierce does, unfortunately. Pierce then, I'm gonna cry. Oh my God. Pierce then proceeds to completely take advantage of Lizzie and the state of mind that she's in. At this point, Lizzie is semi-conscious. She is really in and out of it. She's having memories of the monster, and she's crying, and she is nowhere near in the headspace to be able to give consent, and anyone who argues that Lizzie cheated on Hughie in this moment needs to go back to school and learn how to decipher words, because it is written clear as day. It did not ever occur to me that this was Lizzie cheating. As soon as I read this scene, I knew Pierce completely took advantage of Lizzie, and if you are not old enough or smart enough to understand that, you should not be picking up these books. I'm sorry, you just shouldn't be. That, unfortunately, is what Hugh and Gibbsy walk in on, to Pierce taking advantage of Lizzie Young. And as you can imagine, what Hugh feels in that moment when he walks into his own bedroom and he sees his girlfriend and his teammate in that position, it breaks Hughie. It completely shatters Hughie's world. When those lights go on and Lizzie sees Hugh in the doorway, Lizzie is so confused. She doesn't understand why she sees two Hughie's, because she thinks that the person who was on her was Huey. When Huey turns the light on, she's so confused because she had ex-Pierce to go get him. So she is under the impression that this was Huey on her. She is devastated when she realizes what was happening. Now, Huey is so upset by what he sees that he actually ends up getting sick over it. And Gibbsy is actually trying to understand, and he's trying to explain to Hugh, like, maybe we don't know what really happened in there. And Hugh, he's not in the position to be able to hear Gibbsy out right now, and he's just begging for Gibbsy's help. And then we move to the next day, which is November 2nd, 2003, and Lizzie wakes up in Claire's bed. And when Lizzie wakes up, she runs over to Gibbsy's house in search of Huey. And Lizzie is trying to explain what happened, and she's trying to tell Huey that she would never do that on purpose and that she didn't know what was going on, and Huey is just not in a place to be able to hear her out right now. Honestly, Lizzie is not being super sympathetic to Hugh and what he witnessed either. Neither one of them are in really a place to have this conversation right now. But Lizzie is desperate to get Huey to understand, and Huey is just desperate to get her away. Hugh ends up losing it on Lizzie. Lizzie is panicking about Huey sending her away, and I personally believe that this is like a trauma response to all those times Lizzie's dad, when she would have an outburst or an episode, immediately Mike would just send Lizzie away, and now she had this situation happen with Pierce, and now Huey is sending her away, and she is just in a state of panic. Later on, Huey is hanging out with Gibbsy and Feely. He begs them to never bring up what happened with Lizzie. I would also like to point out here, we did not see Feely at Hugh's party, and remember, he brought a guest with him to the party. Feely is now learning what happened with Lizzie through Hugh the next day. And so Hugh is begging them to never allow him to get back together with Lizzie, and they promise him no matter what that they would not let him go back to her. He makes them promise that they'll never bring up what Lizzie did that night. So now we are moving on to part 20. So we are in Lizzie's point of view, and it is November 5th, 2003. And Lizzie's father, Mike, he tries to send Lizzie back to the hospital, but because of logistics, they sent Lizzie back home after only 72 hours. This is probably, I'm debating whether this is the worst or after Kiva died was the worst. This is one of the worst times we see Lizzie's mental health really just ruining her life, really. That's the only way I could describe it. Lizzie's mental health is full stop ruining her life in this part of the book. Lizzie is cycling between really extreme hypersexuality and really low depressive episodes, and she's having really severe suicidal thoughts and feelings, and she just absolutely hates herself at this point in time. She doesn't trust her hearing, she doesn't trust her thoughts, she doesn't trust the things that she sees, and she has this really sad thought every time Lizzie's father leaves the house. She believes he's leaving her on her own to give her time to off herself. And she feels that from him, that he would be better off if she just didn't exist. On this day, we have Huey is stopping by Lizzie's house to pick up his charger that he left there, and Lizzie is really not respecting Huey's boundaries because remember, she is fluctuating between hypersexuality and those depressive episodes, and as soon as Huey leaves, Lizzie proceeds to start self-harming herself. I have reread Releasing 10 multiple times over this last year, and this is always the part where I have to put the book down. And I know that sounds crazy because a lot of this book is very dark, but for some reason it's seeing Lizzie on her own and having no support system and feeling like everyone hates her and people would be better off without her. This is the part of releasing 10 that I even have to close up the book and put it down and never pick it up again. And even when I start to reread it, I never finish this last chunk of the book. So if this is very hard for me to get through, I apologize, but that is why I am here to help you. For anyone else who has felt this way while reading this book, we're gonna go through it together. Moving on to the next day, Hughie broke Pierce's face, and we clap and cheer for that. I mean, thank you, Hugh. Thank God. Lizzie has come back to school. Unfortunately, she is still hooking up with Pierce. Even while she's trying and she's begging to get back with Hughie, she is still hooking up with Pierce. Again, this is the worst version of Lizzie that we see. Hughie is just doing his best to try and focus on himself. Hughie got that job that he always wanted as a lifeguard at the public pool that he and Lizzie used to swim at. I'm gonna cry. Hugh is having a really hard time. Hughie is really hating himself for still loving Lizzie and wanting the best for Lizzie and being attracted to Lizzie and not hating her for what she did with Pierce. He hates himself for it. So they're both really not in a great place anymore. Lizzie is in outer space basically at this point. She feels nothing. She's completely numb. She's using a lot of Mark's old language, which is really scary to see. And Claire even calls Lizzie out because Claire saw Lizzie kiss Pierce right out in the open in the middle of school. And that's when Lizzie lets Claire know that her and Hughie broke up. Like it was nothing. And Lizzie is so far out of it that she actually falls in the girls' bathroom and she's laughing like a hyena, and out of one of the stalls pops a little redhead. When Lizzie sees the redhead, mind you, this is the first encounter Lizzie has with Katie, and Lizzie immediately says, "Who the is this?" Claire scolds her for it, and Katie lets Claire know it's fine. Katie then asks Claire, is this girl high? Is she on crack? And then we move on to Hughie's point of view on the 7th of November, and he's having a conversation with Johnny, and Johnny has noticed that Hugh is not in his usual mood. He's not his usual Hugh self. He asks Hugh if he wants to go for a run, so he goes on this run with Captain Fantastic over here, and Johnny lets Hugh know that he heard about what happened with Pierce that last weekend at Hugh's birthday, and Hugh doesn't divulge any information to Johnny. And that's when we remember that Johnny Kavanagh really knows nothing. At this point in time, Johnny Kavanagh is the nothing knower of the Boys of Tommen. Then we move on to November 8th of 2003. Hughie gets home from, I think, work. He finds Lizzie and Claire asleep on his mom's lap, and he sees tear streaks all over all of them. And I'm just gonna read you what Hughie says about Lizzie using his mom for comfort in this situation, because if this was me, I would not be as gracious as Hugh Biggs. I'll just tell you that for free. I would not be as nice about Lizzie using my mom for comfort when I'm the one that's hurting. But I'm going to explain how Hugh views this. He says, "We'd spent our childhood in this house, in a fortress of love, security, and comfort that my mother had built around us. I knew that's why Liz continued to return. Why she was here right now. Hell, I didn't even blame her. I'd been in her home. It was like experiencing the funeral on repeat in that house. Sadness and tears, pain and anger, playing on a loop like a broken record. My home had become her reprieve, and breakup or not, I would never take that away from her. I only hoped she could find in Claire whatever she had found in me, because I couldn't give it to her anymore." Sinead then asks Hughie what happened, why did they break up, and he tells his mother that Lizzie cheated on him. And he reminds his mom that Lizzie is sick and he doesn't think that she meant anything by it. He's just trying to let his mom know that he knows that this isn't really Lizzie. And even Sinead says she knows that they're gonna get through this. Damn, Sinead, I hope you're right, because where is Where is claiming 10? I don't see her. Then we move on to November 12th of 2003, and we are in Lizzie's point of view, and the roller coaster is about to crash. Pierce wants to make it official with Lizzie, and Lizzie is starting to come out of her manic episode, and everything is starting to hit her all at once. And then 2 days later, on November 14th, 2003, Lizzie heads over to Hughie's house on a day that Sinead and Claire are not home. And she tries to apologize to Hughie, and she tries to explain to Hughie what went down with Pierce on that first night of Hughie's party, and Hugh doesn't want to hear it. And I don't really blame him. He has been watching Lizzie run around with Pierce, and he is not interested in hearing her reasoning for it anymore. And in this scene, he actually throws his mattress outside on his lawn while the two of them are having a really hard breakdown. It is really hard to read. And even though they're having this really devastating moment and Hugh is so angry he threw the mattress outside, he still lets Lizzie know, and he consoles Lizzie as she's breaking down, that he knows that she doesn't mean it. This isn't her and that she's sick. But he explains to her he doesn't have the switch in his brain like Lizzie has to just turn his feelings on and off, that he can't stop recalling what happened with Lizzie and Pierce. And this is what Lizzie is thinking in her mind as it's happening. I'm just gonna read it out for you guys. It's just best coming from the horse's mouth, because I can't, this scene is so upsetting for me to read, I can't even give my own words as to what this scene makes me feel. So we're just gonna read it straight from Lizzie. She says, "I wanted to clean up my image and not be a humiliation to him every damn day, but I was still me. I couldn't erase my past. I was used up and dirty. I always had been. There was no way of fixing that. There was no magic spell to eradicate my memories. Knowing that I'd given my body to a boy I couldn't bear to remember made me want to hold my breath forever. It made me want to peel the skin from my bones. Shame. That was all I was left with." And the whole time this is happening, I'm asking, where's Peter? Where's Peter Biggs? Anyone remember that guy? Where did he go? So then we move on to November 20th, 2003. Hughie is realizing that it is really over between him and Liz, but she'll never lose her place in Hugh's heart. But Hughie can't be what Lizzie needs anymore. And Hughie is thinking about the rest of his life having to go without Lizzie after believing all this time that they were going to be together forever. And Hughie is just devastated, but he's really accepting the fact that they are really over. At this point in time, welcome back Peter Biggs. I guess he woke up from his frickin' hibernation, and Peter is trying to talk to Hugh about his relationship problems. And Hugh basically tells his dad, "You've been a ghost in this house for the last decade almost." And he lets Peter know that these random visits that he gives to Sinead and Claire are not going to work on Hugh. And Hughie lets Peter know that he doesn't need him anymore and he doesn't want Peter a part of his life. Then we move on to November 29th, 2003, and Lizzie is completely numb, but she's hyper alert of everything going on around her. And then we learn that Lizzie has been waking up every morning, getting into her uniform, and hiding out in the fields behind her house. She's trying to hide from her father, and she is scared to death to get back on her meds and remember everything that she did that hurt Hughie. And she's really battling between her head and her heart. November 29th, 2003, we are in Lizzie's point of view. She is numb, but she's hyper focused. She's getting a lot of schoolwork done. She's writing like a creative madwoman. She doesn't care what anyone in school is saying about her at this point. And she explains that she feels like she's found a cave inside of herself that she can go and hide, and she can escape the rest of the world. And she finds it funny that she used to be so afraid of this feeling. And I'm just going to read to you how Lizzie explains it. She says, she was excelling at school and taking what I wanted from life. If people didn't like that, then to hell with them. I laughed at how scared I used to be of feeling like this. All the dread and the worry. All the panic and uncertainty, and for what? Because I feared losing what I loved the most in life? He was already long gone. I had nothing left to lose now. I had those damn doctors with their pills. Liars, the lot of them. When I was on the meds, I was miserable, and now I was free, and I felt liberated. Then we move on to December 3rd of 2003, and we are in Huey's point of view, and Liz keeps showing up to his house trying to get him back, and she is not respecting Huey's boundaries. While Huey has all of the guys over, Lizzie barges into Huey's room and she starts blasting Silver Springs, which, if you know, you know, Silver Springs. And these two are locked in a stare-off as the song plays. In the middle of the night on December 5th, 2003, Huey waits for them to go to bed and barges into Claire's room where Lizzie is sleeping and starts playing Go Your Own Way by Fleetwood Mac. And if you know the Fleetwood Mac lore of Silver Springs and Go Your Own Way, then you fully understand what is occurring between these two here. Then we move on to December 12th of 2003. The rugby team won a special cup. I'll try and find it online what this is, but it's called the Shealer's Cup. And Feely convinces Huey to go to a party one of their teammates is throwing. And Huey goes to this party, but Feely is a little occupied with his music club friend down here, Katie. And all of a sudden, Mr. Brightside starts playing, and Huey looks up and sees Lizzie and Pierce basically tonguing each other down on the dance floor, and Huey feels like he's being lit on fire. And that's when Gibbsy comes to the rescue and lets Huey know it's time to let Lizzie go. And that's when Huey says, I was so relieved I hadn't ruined my friendship with Gibbsy for a girl who was anyone's girl, because that's exactly how it turned out to be. Oh God, this hurts too much. This is why I don't read past this point. And although that scene is a very sweet scene between Hugh and Gibbsy, it's just really hard to read. The rugby team is concerned about Huey. The whole rugby team is basically ready to throw down with Pierce because of the rumors that are going around between Pierce, Lizzie, and Hugh. And Huey puts on a mask and he basically tells them everything is fine. He tells his team that they just broke up and now Lizzie happens to be with Pierce. Then we learn from one of Huey's teammates named Danny that Lizzie has been throwing herself around with a lot of guys on the team. I don't know if I believe that. According to Danny, Lizzie's been throwing herself to a lot of the boys on Huey's team. And that's when Danny lets Huey know, like, he kind of knows what happened between the two of them. And the team has Huey's back. And if push came to shove, they'd choose Hugh over Pierce. And then we move on to Lizzie's point of view, where we learn that Pierce actually invited her to this party and she only really went there to see Huey. But Lizzie is drunk and we know Pierce is using her. And that's when Lizzie realizes where she is and what this is doing to Hugh. She locks herself in a bathroom and starts banging her head against the door. And that's when she breaks a toothbrush in the bathroom to use to start self-harming herself at this party. And that's when Huey sees Lizzie and he notices how dilated her pupils are, and he basically tells Lizzie Pierce should not be taking advantage of her in this state of mind. And that's when Lizzie says, well, what's the point? Lizzie has really just given up on herself, given up on really everything at this point in time. And then we move on to December 18th. Pierce approaches Huey. Huey's not having it. Can we blame Hugo Bossman here? He's not having it. And Huey just keeps reminding Pierce, like, they have been friends since they were 4 years old. And he can't believe that Pierce would hurt Hugh in that way. And Pierce is basically begging Huey to go check on Liz because there's something not right with her. That's when Pierce tells Hugh that Lizzie stopped coming to school. He can't get in touch with her. That's when Hughie throws it in Pierce's face that no matter what Lizzie does, no matter how many times Lizzie and Pierce hook up, Lizzie will always belong to Hughie. Hughie decides that he's gonna go see Lizzie after school, so he gets on the bus and gets off at her stop. When Hughie gets off the bus, he finds Lizzie in her school uniform. She's sitting on her front steps in the pouring rain, and Lizzie tells Hughie that she's hiding from her dad and she's trying to avoid him, and she explains to Hugh that her and her father are no longer on speaking terms, and her father now won't let Lizzie get anywhere near Catherine. Lizzie is petrified to get back on her meds because she's afraid of remembering everything about Pierce, anything about her past. That's when Hughie decides to take Lizzie upstairs to her room, and that's when Lizzie opens up and tells Hughie that Mike is now considering Lizzie dangerous to Catherine's health. Then we jump to Lizzie's point of view, and she's really starting to understand like Hugh is not okay with what has happened, and for the final time she opens up to Hughie about the monster. Lizzie and Hugh have a very intense experience. We're not going to get into details on what happened, just know Hugh and Liz start to get kind of physical with each other, and once it's over, Hugh feels disgusted with himself because he feels like he took advantage of Lizzie in the same way that Mark took advantage of Kiva. He hates himself for what he just allowed to happen. That's when Lizzie starts to explain to Hughie that it's fine what Hugh and Liz just did because at least Hugh didn't do what the monster does to Lizzie. And then she starts telling Hugh that the monster does stuff to her in her dreams. She kind of throws it in Hughie's face that she's technically been cheating on him for years with the monster. And she says, I probably shouldn't have said that. Kind of like everyone else, when Lizzie brings up the monster for the first time, Hugh is starting to think she's kind of crazy, and he says he can't talk to her when she's talking like this. So even though, as the readers, we know that Lizzie just admitted something huge out loud to Hughie, Hughie is not thinking what she's saying is real. And so Hughie kind of just brushes it off and says, I can't talk to you when you're like this. And then we move on to December 30th, 2003. Lizzie sneaks up on Hughie in the shower and she begs him to take her back. And I have to say, of all the really hard and devastating scenes to read in this book, this is probably the hardest one for me to swallow. I can't. And to me, this is the real Hugh and Liz breakup scene. This is when it is really over between the two of them. This scene happens in Hughie's point of view. Lizzie is just hugging Hugh and she's really like holding on to him, and she says, I can't breathe without you. And Hughie knows exactly how that feels, and she's begging Hughie for another chance. And she tells him she'll do absolutely anything if it means that Hughie will take her back and give her another chance. And Hughie tells her that he'll always love her, but he can't take her back. And he explains to her that while Hughie knows that Lizzie didn't mean to do what she did, he also can't trust her enough to not do it again. And we can see Hughie's internal struggle here. He really wants to give Lizzie another chance because he knows Lizzie's heart, but he also has to protect himself at this point in time. So he tells her no, and they are officially over. And Hughie tells her that maybe at some point in the future, one day they can be friends again. And he tells her that he is always going to love her no matter what. I had to take the sweater off because it's getting hot. But we move on to December 31st, 2003. This is Hughie's first New Year's Eve party without Lizzie Young. And my God, does it hurt. And it's Feely's plan that they're all gonna go to the BCS disco. Our friend Joey Lynch, he goes to school at BCS, and all of our boys, they go to Tommen, but they have a plan to go over to the other side of town and hang out with the BCS crew. Johnny is seen dancing with a female security guard, and we see Feely. Farmer Feely is watching that same cute redhead that we keep spotting. He's watching her on the dance floor. And the guys keep asking Huey if he plans on getting a New Year's kiss tonight. And in Huey's POV, he just knows he's not there yet. He's just not ready to replace Liz in that way. But Feely did promise that Huey would be getting a New Year's kiss. You will live to rue the day. And then our guy Hugh Biggs watches as Feely is making a beeline to a certain redhead when the countdown begins for his New Year's kiss. Unfortunately though, Feely is intercepted by another girl named Casey. Now she's not on the board, but she will be soon enough. Huey observes on as Feely pauses and then proceeds to kiss this girl back. And when this girl intercepts Feely and gets Katie's New Year's kiss, let me just say, lives across Ballylagan are changed forever. Everyone's lives are basically ruined by this one innocent, simple act by our good friend Casey. And because that happens, our friend Katie here then grabs Huey and basically begs him for a kiss. She's really embarrassed by this, but he kind of takes pity on her and then decides, you know what? I don't have to say no anymore. I am a free man. I can say yes. And that's exactly what Huey does. And for the first time in Hugh Biggs' life, he kisses someone who is not Lizzie Young. And lives are changed forever. Lives are ruined, really. Later on in the night, when our friend Feely is getting busy with Casey, and Hugh and Katie are basically waiting for him to be done with her, Katie is sitting there thanking Huey for not humiliating her and for being so gracious about it and being a gentleman. And Hugh explains the kiss as okay. He says it's not fireworks, but it wasn't bad, and he's okay with it. And from Katie, we learn that this is just something Casey does, and Casey will probably forget about Feely tomorrow. And as we know from Hugh, this is kind of what Feely does as well. Huey then gives Katie his jacket because it's getting a little bit chilly outside, and Katie promises that she will return Hugh's jacket to school on Monday. Huey is shocked because he doesn't realize that this girl had been going to his school to begin with. And that is when Katie reminds him that not only do they go to school together, but Katie has also been at Huey's house at his last birthday party. And remember, we didn't see Feely at that birthday party, which means we didn't see Katie. So who knows what was going on during that birthday party? I wonder. And that is when it finally clicks for Huey that this girl is Feely's music friend that he had been noticing Feely blushing over and running around with. The girl that he knew was special to Feely. That's when our good friend Feely shows back up and he sees the interaction between Hugh and Katie going down, and he is obviously not happy about it. And then later on in the night, Feely is asking Huey to delete Katie's number. Now at this point in time, Huey and Feely, they're both wasted. But Huey is too busy thinking about Lizzie and what she's been doing tonight. And that's when our friend Gibbsy comes over and he's all excited and he's celebrating about the fact that he saw Huey kiss Katie and he's finally moving on from the Viper. And that's when Johnny, finally, Mr. Johnny Cavanaugh wakes up and asks Huey if this is the girl that Huey has been missing practices for, and Johnny even notes how beautiful she is. And Feely literally ends up punching Hughie in the face over this. And he seems very raged out and devastated. But then Hughie reminds him that Feely was the one who kind of messed this up with Katie. And that's when Feely remembers what he had been doing with Katie's friend Casey, and he asks Hugh, why would you let me do that? And then Gibbsy tells Hughie that he's gonna be swinging by the Biggs house later to give Claire her New Year's Eve kiss. And for the first time, we really see Hugh become resistant towards the idea of Gibbsy and Claire getting together. And let me tell you right now, when we get into the other books, that is going to become a very consistent theme. And then we move on to Lizzie's point of view of the same day, which is New Year's Eve 2003. And again, Lizzie is in the absolute worst headspace that we have ever seen her in. And that's when Mike walks in on Lizzie and Pierce in Lizzie's room, and they get into a huge blowout fight, which leads to Mike slapping Lizzie across the face and Catherine collapsing on the floor. And I'm just gonna read you a little bit of what Lizzie is feeling in this moment, because again, I feel like it's best to get the actual words from the book for these kinds of moments where Lizzie is really thinking in her own head, and her father is crying and shaking her and saying, stop doing this to us. And Lizzie internally says, I knew he was crying. I could see the tears. I could hear the agony in his voice, but I didn't care. I felt nothing in this moment. Nothing but intense hatred toward my entire family for allowing the monster in our house. Where the hell were you when I was screaming for you? I tried to scream, only to end up laughing manically as tears streamed down my cheeks. You were never there. You never came when I needed you at night. Do you remember all the nights I screamed for you? Well, now I'm screaming again, and this time I'm screaming, fuck you, you hypocrite. And that's when we hear Catherine go down and she starts screaming for Mike. And unfortunately, Lizzie is witnessing this, and she says she can't feel anything towards this moment. And then we move on to January 1st, 2004, and we are in Hughie's point of view, Hughie woke up and it's a great day. He woke up with a black eye and he woke up hungover, but he's in a surprisingly upbeat mood. And this is the first time Hughie hasn't woken up depressed and wanting to bury his head in the sand over his breakup with Lizzie. He's having a really great, peaceful day until Claire comes in with tears streaming down her face after she's learned that Catherine is now in the hospital after suffering another heart attack on New Year's Eve, which I think I've seen this film before. And as soon as Hughie learns what happened with Catherine, he is running out the door to the hospital. And then we jump to Lizzie's point of view, and she's at the hospital. She's on one side of her mom while her father is on the other side of her mom. Once again, Mike is blaming Lizzie for their family's misfortunes. That's when Mike starts asking Lizzie, where has Hughie been? And Lizzie lets him know that she hurt Hugh. And Mike basically tells her, well, I don't blame him for leaving you. And he tells her that Lizzie has broken enough of their hearts, that she's broken her father's heart, her mother's heart, and now Hughie's heart. Lizzie says to her father that she thinks it's time for her to go away for a while. And this time she's serious about it, and she wants to stop hurting the people that she loves, and she finally understands that she needs to go and get some professional help. And she doesn't want to wait. She wants to leave now, right now, before she can change her mind about it. And we know Mike loves to hear that. He loves to send Lizzie to inpatient facilities, and so he's immediately on the case, on the phone, calling doctors, trying to find Lizzie a room at one of these inpatient facilities. But that's when the door opens and in walks our brave knight, Hugh Biggs, to the rescue, and Lizzie immediately just melts into him. And Hugh is there consoling Mike and Lizzie. It's just like back in the day, 3 years ago. He was doing this after Kiva passed away. That's when we learned that Mike is sending Lizzie to something called Brickley House, which is a private psychiatric rehabilitation center. And Lizzie is leaving with no clue as to when she'll be able to get out. She's apologizing to Hughie for hurting him, and he's just promising that if she takes the doctor's advice and she listens to what they say, she will get better and she'll be her again. And that's when we jump to Hughie's point of view, and he's watching Catherine and Liz hug and say goodbye to each other. Catherine is devastated, Lizzie is devastated, and that's when Hugh decides in his head that he would do anything in his power to help Lizzie get the help that she needs. He just wants her to be her again. And this is killing Hugh to witness this happen and to really understand just how deep his love goes for her. He says being there for her isn't something he even has to question in his mind. It's like a natural reaction to him to automatically go into that hero mode for Lizzie. That's when he realizes that he still wants Lizzie. He is willing to put all that pain aside. He says all of the pain can wait, and he's shocked that he still, after everything, wants Lizzie. I'm going to read you one of my favorite quotes from this book now, from Hughie's point of view. It's beautiful. It's literally every time I see it come up on TikTok, I cry a little bit. I shed a tear, I'm not going to lie. So I'm going to read that for you. Every inch of me so longed for every inch of her, and I couldn't turn my feelings off. What I felt for her wasn't expendable, and it hadn't shown up overnight. My love for her had 9 years to deepen and grow, and the roots went deep. It wasn't something that could be rooted out and tossed away. She was embedded in the foundation of who I was as a person. She was ingrained in every fundamental life choice I made from the age of 7. Getting over her wouldn't happen overnight. If it took an equal measure of time to unlove a person, then I had 9 years of misery to contend with. I was 16 now, so that meant I would be 25 before she finally left my system. It wasn't even close to being fair, because I didn't choose this. I didn't want to end us. I would have spent the rest of my life beside her if she had just shown me the same commitment. And that's when Lizzie makes Hughie promise that he's not going to tell anyone about any of this, about where she's going, how long she's going to be gone. She doesn't even want Hughie to tell his mother about where Lizzie is headed. And Hughie is dying on the inside at this goodbye. And that's when Lizzie asks Hughie if he'll be there when she gets out, and he promises her that he will. And that's when Lizzie leaves with Mike to go for who knows how long away for psychiatric treatment. And that's when Catherine looks at Hughie and says, "You lied to her, didn't you? You're not going to be here when she comes back." And all Hughie could manage to say is, "I'm sorry." And now we go into part 21 of Releasing 10. This is our final part of the book, and it's a quick one, and it's my least favorite part of every Boys of Tommen book I've ever read. This is my least favorite chapters to read. Now it is January 8th, 2004, and we are in Hughie's point of view, and he's telling Claire that Lizzie went to Spain with her mom so Catherine can recuperate after her heart attack on New Year's Eve. They're in the hallways of Tommen when Farmer Feely shoulder checks Hugh, and Claire is confused. She's asking, what is that about? What's going on with Feely? And Hugh is acting clueless, like he has no idea why Feely is so upset with him. See, Claire is confused, but I'm not confused. I know what's going on here. And that's when Hugh acknowledges that Feely has been like this since that New Year's Eve party. Remember what happened on that day? And that's when Hughie in the hall is approached by a small redhead once again. And once Katie passes on by, Gibbsy and Claire are celebrating the fact that Hughie is moving on. And that's when we learn that Claire actually knows Katie. She says she's super quiet, but she has seen Katie and Feely hanging out. And that's when Gibbsy lets Claire know that Gibbsy saw Hughie at the New Year's Eve party kissing Katie. And Hughie is trying to explain to them that it was just a shift. Now, I am American. I'm pretty sure that means it was just a kiss. It's not going to be anything more than just that one kiss on New Year's Eve. But they really want Hughie to move on. It's January 10th, 2004, and we are in Lizzie's point of view. And Mike has brought Liz to the hospital, and he is begging the hospital to help Lizzie. He says that she's whoring herself out. And that's when we learn that there is a 3-year gap in Lizzie's medical records. And that's when Mike says he doesn't really know a whole lot about that, but his wife knows everything, and that his wife should be contacted about any of Lizzie's medical records. And that's when the doctors explain to Mike that Lizzie is experiencing full-blown mania. And it's consistent with bipolar 1, but the depressive episodes are more consistent with bipolar 2. They don't really know which one Lizzie has because of her age. If she was an adult and she had these symptoms long term, they would be able to diagnose her. But because of her age, and because they can't really get a full grasp on what's happening with Lizzie, they don't really know how to properly diagnose her bipolar disorder. And Mike just wants her medicated to make her better. He says, please just give her medication so we can be on our way. But because Lizzie came off of her meds with no medical supervision, it is now going to take a lot of time. The doctors give them a time period of at least 2 months to regulate Lizzie and get her back on some sort of productive treatment plan. They're learning that this is not going to be an easy process. This is going to take a lot of time and become very complicated for Lizzie. And that's when Mike asks the doctors about electroshock therapy. And they say that they don't really recommend that for what Lizzie has and for people Lizzie's age. But Mike is basically begging for it, and Lizzie ends up agreeing to it. So Lizzie is going to be going in for 10 sessions of electroshock therapy. And then we move on to January 25th, 2004, and we are back in Huey's point of view. And we learn that Lizzie at this point has been gone for a total of 14 days. Pierce has already moved on. Are we shocked? Raise your hand if you're shocked. I'm not. We learn there's a lot of girls that are asking Huey out, and he's just not feeling it. He knows he's not ready, and he's just dazing off into his locker when he is approached once again by this redhead. Katie is coming over to apologize again about New Year's Eve, and she's very clearly embarrassed about the whole situation. And that's when Huey calls Katie pretty, and it kind of shocks Katie. And that's when Huey calls her gorgeous. Huey says Katie is turning as red as her hair. And that's when he starts to get a little bit uncomfortable with this encounter, and Katie ends up asking Huey to maybe go out on a date or to go hang out as friends, and she's really embarrassed by this, and he is very endeared by it. And that's when we learn Katie has a New Year's Eve bucket list of things she wants to accomplish this year. And I'm gonna read you Katie's New Year's Eve bucket list. It's let go of the past, stop worrying about things I have no control of, get over the asshole who broke my heart, go to mass every Sunday, kiss a boy, make more friends, take more risks. She grinned up at me. Just your stereotypical teenage girl bucket list. But he says that he's not ready to really move on from his last relationship, and that's when Katie agrees. She's also not ready to move on from her last relationship. I wonder who that was with. Huey suggests that they hang out as friends, and Katie agrees, and they make a plan to hang out this Friday. And this is why I hate this part of the book. While Hugh is doing great and moving on, we move to Lizzie's point of view, and it is January 29th, 2004, and we have Lizzie. I'm gonna try really hard to not cry, but this part really upset me the first time I read it, and this was the first time I had to go back over it. Lizzie is strapped to a gurney. She is talking to an anesthesiologist who is getting ready to put her to sleep while they're attaching they're prepping her for electroshock therapy, basically. And all Lizzie is doing, and all the image that Lizzie is holding on to in her head, is an image of Huey, and she's just praying that she never forgets him. No matter how many times they have to do this to her, she just doesn't want to forget Hugh. And then we move on to Huey's point of view, and it is February 13th, 2004. And Hugh is buying Katie a movie ticket, and they are at the movies together. And while they're sitting down, Hugh is very tense because he says he's waiting for the other shoe to drop, because that's typically how it goes with Liz. But Hugh is shocked that Katie is just content to sit there and enjoy time with Huey. And after the movie ends, Katie even asks Huey, is it a bad omen that their first friendship date happened to be on Friday the 13th. I wonder, what does that mean for our future? I wonder. And then they agree that they're gonna hang out again next Friday. And then we move on to March 12th, 2004, and we are in Lizzie's point of view. And I'm gonna read again what Lizzie is experiencing. It's way clearer if I just read it directly from the book. Lizzie says, "The clearer my mind became, the worse my guilt grew, because with clarity came consequences, and I was drowning in mine. Months of fluctuating moods had resulted in my world imploding around me, and the medicine flushing through my veins provided me with I'm trying really hard not to cry. Provided me with a glaring itinerary of proof. I couldn't run from it. I couldn't hide. All I could do was sit in my bed and work through the guilt, shame, and self-loathing. I wasn't ready to go home yet, not even close, but the urge to race back home, fall to my knees in front of Hugh, and beg for his forgiveness was potent. He was suffering the consequences of loving a person like me. I knew I would break him back when we were children. It was the reason I tried so hard to push him away when I was manic. Problem was, I never thought it through until it was too late. I was under some false assumption that I could somehow live without the boy who breathed air into my lungs when nothing had ever been more impossible. He was brave and honorable, and I had taken that away from him. I had taken his shiny halo and tarnished him beyond repair. I remember the boy he used to be before everything went dark, but I had a real hard time remembering the girl I used to be. She was so faintly imprinted in my memory that I doubted she ever existed to begin with. The doctors explained the episodes to me and assured me that I wasn't a sex addict, but that I had experienced bouts of severe hypersexuality when I was in the throes of mania. The doctors told me that it was okay, that these feelings would come in waves. They wouldn't always be present. Afterward, I was offered a birth control implant in my arm to prevent pregnancy for 3 years. I took it because I was a mess, the equivalent of a human wrecking ball. Everyone and everything I came into contact with ended up in ruin. And I didn't need to bring any babies into the world and ruin them too." And then we move to April 5th, 2004. This is 4 years after Kiva Young and Lizzie were held hostage by Mark Allen. Just a quick reminder there that that's what this date means. We learn that it's Lizzie's 99th day away. I'm gonna cry. Like, I feel the tears coming. I've been fighting them this whole video, and I really feel that they're coming now. Hugh's life is moving along just great. School was easy, work was fun. The rugby team is doing amazing. You know, we got Johnny Kavanagh on our team, our rugby team. We're golden. Hugh is breaking his own records in swimming. Gibbs and Claire were happier than ever. Johnny is bulking up. The only person not doing too great is our friend Farmer Feely. And we really see that Lizzie's world is able to move on without her. But Hugh is still feeling her absence. For a few weeks there, Mike had been making weekly calls to Hugh to update about Lizzie's progress in the psychiatric hospital, but Sinead put a stop to that because it wasn't healthy for Hugh, and Hugh wasn't really able to move on, being stuck there with Lizzie, and so Sinead put a stop to Hugh learning about Lizzie's progress, which is good. That is a good thing that she did. Hugh's been hanging out with Claire and Gibbsy in the evenings, with the guys on the weekends when he's not working, and hanging out with Katie, and they've even started to open up to each other about their family life, and we learn that they both have really severe daddy issues, and they have spent 8 consecutive Fridays together. But this time, when they go out to eat, Hugh catches on for the first time that this is probably a date. Katie's all dressed up nice, they're at a nice restaurant, and Katie is asking Hughie a lot of questions about his relationship with Lizzie. And Hugh really doesn't want to talk about it. But he allows Katie to ask him a few questions about Liz. She wants to know, was she your first girlfriend? Was she your only girlfriend? Were you guys together for a long time? Did you sleep with her? Were you in love with her? Did she break up with you? Do you plan on getting back together with her? And Hugh answers all of these questions very honestly. And that's when Katie acknowledges the fact that, okay, that's great, but isn't she best friends with your sister? And he says yes. And Katie realizes that means they spend a lot of time together. And she asks him, does that tempt you to want to get back together with her? And Huey says no. Remember, Katie doesn't know what all happened here. And that's when Katie realizes that Huey is still in love with Lizzie Young. And that's when Hugh asks her about getting into Tommen. And we learn that Katie was originally enrolled in Tommen during first year, but her father kind of messed that up for her. We don't know a whole lot about that. I'm sure we're going to be finding out soon. And that's when we learn how hard Katie had to really work to get into Tommen. Remember, she's from the side of town that the Lynches come from. And in our next video, we're going to get into that. But she comes from their area. And so getting into Tommen was a long shot, but she made it happen. Hugh is super impressed by that fact that she got into Tommen by, as Chloe Walsh says, sheer will and determination. And that's when Katie asks Hugh if Hugh wants to keep doing this exclusively with Katie. And Hugh admits, I don't know what kind of relationship I can give you. And she says, that's okay. As long as you're moving on from her, do you want to move on with me? And he agrees. And so from here on out, Hugh Biggs is with Katie Wilmot. Yeah. And finally, we get to the last day in Releasing 10. The date is April 19th, 2004. And we start this day in Lizzie's point of view. Unfortunately, our girl is back. She did it. After 3 months, 2 weeks, and 1 day, our girl made it out alive. She did the work that the doctors gave her. She had 10 sessions of electroshock therapy. She had daily therapy. She's on mood stabilizers and antipsychotics. And when she got home to her parents, she explains that it feels very strange. She feels like this is not the house she's supposed to go back to. Kind of feels like a stranger walking back through her own life. She talks about the bike that's been there on her lawn for years. That's her bike, but it doesn't feel like her bike. The house, that's her house, but it doesn't feel like her house. The parents that are her parents, but they don't feel like her parents. And she's kind of weirded out by this. She says it's strange, but she can handle it now. But now we have to return back to Tommen. And when she gets there, she has a meeting with Mr. Toomey, I think is how you pronounce his name, which he's like the head of the school. She had been doing schoolwork from her hospital bed when she was able to. As soon as she gets out of that meeting, she is greeted by the Sunshine Girl herself. Claire Biggs is there and grabs Lizzie, and Lizzie just lets herself melt into this hug that Claire gives her, and she realizes how much she's missed her friends. I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry. And Claire, being the social butterfly that she is, gives Lizzie a full rundown on all the drama that's been going on at school. We learn that there is this strange contest between the 5th year girls called Binding 13, and they all plan to try and get Johnny Kavanaugh to fall in love with them and to claim them as his girlfriend. And that's when Lizzie says Johnny's a snob. There's nothing he cares about more than rugby. And Claire kind of agrees. They say, yeah, he's good looking, he's tall, he's muscular, but it doesn't really, Johnny doesn't really do it for our 2 blonde girls. I wonder what's up next? And after they spend the afternoon catching up, Lizzie knows that she has to confront Huey. And so she waits for him to get out of his last class of the day. And he literally walks directly into her on his way to training. And she drops her books and he picks them up. And when he realizes who's standing in front of them, it's like the wind is knocked out of him. And that's when Lizzie I'm not gonna cry. Okay. And that's when Lizzie asks Hugh if they could go talk before training, and Hugh reluctantly agrees. And that's when we move on to Huey's point of view. Huey is talking about the fact that he has a million places to be after school today, but Liz's return has put a stop to everything. They're sitting at picnic tables in front of the school, and that's when Hugh gets his first good look at her, and he can't believe how much she's grown up in the last 3.5 months. Her hair is a little bit shorter. She was a lot thinner and taller now, and all the remnants of her cute childhood features are gone. He says, but it was her eyes that socked me right in the chest. Those big, lonesome blue eyes. And he says they're nothing like he's ever seen before or since. And they start to make some small talk. He tells her that she looks good and she looks healthy. And Lizzie tells Huey that he looks so different and he looks so grown up. And they're like joking, like, well, we finally hit puberty. We are there. And that's when Lizzie brings up what all happened between the two of them. And Huey is trying to assure her that they don't have to talk about this. And Lizzie says she has to get this out. Lizzie starts apologizing for all of the hurt she has ever caused Hugh Biggs. And she says that that is the hardest pill she had to swallow while getting better, is the fact that after everything he had done for her, she still hurt him. And Huey admits that he would go back in time and change everything that happened if he could. And Lizzie says that's why she's not going to ask him to. She doesn't want that from him. She's not asking for another chance. She is giving Huey his closure. And that's when she tells him Huey has to stay away from her and they need to stay away from each other. But Lizzie lets Huey know how grateful she is to have had a friend as good as him, and how thankful she is, and how she understands that she's never gonna have a greater friend or a greater love than Hugh Biggs. And while Lizzie is saying this, Hugh wants more than anything to take her back. But then he gets flashbacks of Pierce and Lizzie at the Halloween party, and he knows that it's just not possible anymore. And Huey is trying to convince Lizzie that they can still remain friends, and that's when Lizzie tells him, you can't be friends with the person you're in love with, and I am always going to be in love with you. And that's when Huey understands the same thing. There's never gonna be a day in time where they don't love each other, and so they know they need to go their separate ways. And that's when Lizzie lets Huey know that she is gonna not only take a step back from him, but a step back from everyone in their group. That star that we came to know and love in part 1 of the series, Lizzie is removing herself from that. And Lizzie thanks Huey for not letting what she did get out to all of their friends and all of the kids at school, and she thanks him for protecting her, and he promises that no matter what, he is going to always protect her and her reputation. And that's when Lizzie tells Hugh that she wants him to move on from her and to not feel guilty about it. That's when Lizzie tells Hugh that she knows about him and Katie. And Lizzie takes full responsibility for the dissolution of their friendship, of their relationship. And she says she does not want Hugh to feel guilty about his relationship with Katie because he deserves to spend his life with someone who is not her. I'm just gonna read you exactly what she says because it's literally too painful. She says, I'm happy for you. She tried to smile but choked out a pain sob. I swear I am. She hurried to say as she pulled her hand from mine, it's just hard. I understood. I knew exactly how she felt. A wave of panic washed over me when I watched her stand up and retrieve her books and school bag. I wanted to shout, don't go, but it wouldn't have helped either of us. I'll always love you, Hugh Biggs, Liz said when she rounded the table and stopped in front of me. Inhaling a quivering breath, she leaned down and pressed a kiss to my cheek before whispering, no matter what. And then she was gone. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Releasing 10. Do you understand now why this book has taken the world by storm? Do you understand? I hope you understand, because I'm still at this restaurant and I haven't been able to move on. I haven't been able to really sink my teeth into any other book because this book has left me staring at a wall for almost a year now. It's crazy to think that I read this book over a year ago and I have reread it, I want to say roughly 4 times, sans the last probably 50 pages. I won't read that ever again in my life. I will never read that part ever again in my whole life. But we are officially done with releasing 10. Okay, y'all, so I'm so sorry that the lighting has changed so many times throughout this video. I have been filming this video since 10 o'clock this morning and it is now 7:30 at night. We are gonna wrap up the video here. That is going to be it for our releasing 10 recap. Our next recap is actually going to be Binding 13. Originally, I had planned for Saving 6 to be next, but honestly, the way the characters are set up in releasing 10, I think it only makes sense to introduce you to Shannon and Johnny next, and then we could dive really deep into Joey Lynch. So I just think for structure and for the introduction of the characters and the flow of the story that we are reiterating from these books, I think it'll be best to start Binding 13 first. However, if you want to read the books, if you're trying to do it in chronological order, I would suggest going Saving 6 into Binding 13 because the events of Saving 6 happen before the events of Binding 13. But I think for the storyline and for the way I'm structuring this, I really think you need Shannon Lynch to really appreciate and understand Joey Lynch. And so we're going to do this in the order of releasing 10, Binding 13, Saving 6, Keeping 13, Redeeming 6, Taming 7. That is how we are going to go forward with these books, and hopefully, pretty soon we are going to find out when Claiming 10 is coming out. That is the next book in Boys of Tommen. I actually don't know if it's called Claiming 10. I've just been calling it Claiming 10 for so long that in my head it's been Claiming 10, and then as I just said it out loud, I realized that we don't even know if that's the title. We don't even have a title. We don't even have a title. Oh my god, that's crazy actually. Yeah, we are going to wrap it up if you guys are interested. I talk so much Boys of Tommen on my TikTok. We talk about that all day long over there. We theorize and we discuss the characters and we discuss all the things going on in the background with the other characters as it pertains to the book we are discussing. It is so much fun over on TikTok, and if you're interested, I will put all my information down below and you guys can follow me there. I also have a Bookstagram account. So if you are interested, you can find me on all of my other social medias. They are always listed down below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye guys.